Okay, it's been a little while since I did this and people have been emailing, so let's do it. Put down your phone, grab a book and read something, okay? I'm going to give you 3 book recommendations today. You can, of course, find all of my recommendations at davidpakman.com/recommendations. And if you use the links there to buy any of these books or any of the books that are already on there, we get a little bit of a slice of your Amazon transaction. Okay, I've got 2 nonfiction books for you and then a fiction book. First nonfiction book, just read this last week. Very, very quick read, very interesting. The book is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Annie Duke is both a poker player and a sort of business consultant. And Thinking in Bets is a very interesting book for me as someone in politics because we deal very often with beliefs. And so often conversations in politics are, this is true or that's not true. And in reality, even when we say those things, typically what we're doing is we're assessing the probability that something is true. We have some level of confidence that something is true that is greater than 0 but less than 100. And what Annie Duke very interestingly does, and in a way that with a lot of interesting stories and anecdotes and examples, is she says we would benefit from thinking in bets when we think about our views and decisions that we are making. So much like I said in the last segment, if you told me I need to make a bet about is Michael Bloomberg or Amy Klobuchar more likely to be the nominee, there's a certain amount of money that I'd be willing to bet based on what the return would be. And this is where the idea of, even money odds in betting comes from. When you have odds, you might bet on something that is very unlikely if the reward feels in proportion to how unlikely it is. So the book talks a lot about, when we say clearly the ice caps melting are a sign of climate change. We are really dealing in an assessment of how likely we believe that to be. And when you say to me, are you 100% sure about this, that, or the other thing about climate change? No, not 100% sure, but I'm sure enough that I wouldn't bet against it. And that is exactly the framework that Annie Duke talks about and says, in conversation, we would also be much more open to other ideas if the conversations are less about, I believe A, you believe the opposite of A, and more about, well, I believe this with 70% probability, you seem to believe it only with 40% probability. Let's figure out where the difference comes in, and let's figure out what level of risk or what level of loss we are willing to accept. Very important political applications to the idea of thinking in bets. So that's Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Completely different type of book. I'm about 3/4 of the way through this one. How to Lie with Maps by Mark Monmonier. I recommended to you, I think it's called How to Lie with Statistics some years ago by, I believe the author's last name is Huff. And that is a classic old book. I think it might even be it might be the 50s, might be the 70s. It is a great book that tells you how we should apply a skeptical eye to statistics in scientific studies, in advertising, in commercials, in news reports. This is the more academic equivalent of that, specifically with maps and graphical representations of data. So the book very clearly explains with examples how you can use visual representations of data and maps to further your political propaganda goals. How at the local level, maps can be used, to try to get the zoning board to approve your swimming pool or whatever the case may be. Maybe less relevant globally, but still important to understand. When it comes to climate, really important ways that maps can be used to distort. When it comes to, as many of you know, when you have a globe, when you have a spherical Earth, and you try to map that Earth onto a piece of paper, onto something flat, you have to somehow account for the fact that you're taking a sphere and flattening it out. And the ways in which one chooses to do that have very different implications about political power, about geography, and so many different things. All of that and things that I just haven't gotten to yet, because I'm only 3/4 of the way through the book, is discussed in this book, How to Lie with Maps by Mark Monmonier. Check it out. Very good one. Highly recommend it. All right. Lastly today, here is a fiction recommendation. There are people in my audience who love the author Neil Stephenson. I read a lot of his work. He wrote Snow Crash, which is a book emblematic of the cyberpunk genre. He wrote Zodiac, a sort of eco-thriller that takes place in Boston. He's written a lot of really, really great books. I've had his book Anathem for a while and have not yet read it because I just didn't feel ready to make like the 900 or 1,000 page commitment. I have started reading his book Fall, and I planned to read, this one is like 900 pages. I planned to read just the first couple hundred pages and then put it down. I'm about 600 pages in, and the book is fantastic. It is a journey through a long period of time. It is a story about, in a sense, the digitizing of our human consciousness. The characters are extraordinarily interesting. The writing, as always, by Neil Stephenson is extraordinary. It is a commitment. I'm about 600 pages in. This is Fall or Dodge in Hell. That's the full title of the book. Neil Stephenson. If you've read anything by him, I recommend this. If you liked any of the other things you've read by him, if you've never read anything by Neil Stephenson, I don't know that I start with Fall. I probably start with Snow Crash or Zodiac or Seven Eves, but I could not recommend this more highly. It is a journey. It is a journey through time and space, the likes of which only Neil Stephenson can weave together. So there's 3 recommendations for you. Find all of these and more at davidpakman.com/recommendations.